Welcome, nighttime traveler, to Sleepy Bedtime Stories, your haven of stories and tales to help you sleep. This is the place where traditional tales come to life and accompany you on your journey to rest. But first, tell me where you're listening from tonight and what time it is where you are. I'd love to know if you're joining me from your bed, from a cozy sofa, or perhaps from some corner of the world where you can still feel the spirit of ancient tales. Please leave me a comment. Every message from you is like a fragment of a precious amphora. If you'd like to support this space of peace and relaxation, subscribe and share the channel so that more people can find their refuge here. And now, take a slow, deep breath, because tonight we're going to dive into another thrilling story.
From the holy Sepulchre to the Gallows, the rise and fall of the Knights Templar. The complete history of the order, its foundation, political and financial power, and its brutal end. The light of dawn is just breaking over the walls of Jerusalem as this story begins. It is the year 1119, and the streets of the holy city still reek of dried blood and fresh ashes. 2 decades have passed since the Crusaders conquered these ancient walls, seizing them from Muslim hands in a battle that stained the stones red. But victory brought with it an unexpected problem. Thousands of Christian pilgrims now traverse deserts and mountains to reach the holy sites. And on those dusty roads, death lies in wait. In a modest chamber of the royal palace in Jerusalem, 9 French knights kneel before the patriarch. They are men hardened by war, their faces marked by the desert sun and the scars of battle. Their leader, Hugues de Payens, has the steadfast gaze of one who has found a purpose beyond the sword. At his side, Godfrey de Saint-Omer and 7 other companions swear to protect the pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. They seek neither gold nor titles, or so they say. They take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, becoming something never seen before, warrior monks, men of God who wield the cross in one hand and the sword in the other. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem watches the scene with a mixture of relief and political shrewdness. He needs men to defend the routes. He needs order amidst the chaos left by the conquest. He grants them a home on the Temple Mount, in the old stables that stand upon the ruins of Solomon's Temple. This detail, seemingly simple, will seal their fate forever. From that moment on, they will be known as the Poor Knights of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The Templars. During the early years, they live in the utmost humility. 9 men to protect thousands of kilometers of treacherous roads. They sleep on straw mats, share cloaks in pairs, eat stale bread and water when available. Their official seal depicts precisely this: 2 knights riding a single horse, a symbol of their poverty and brotherhood. But beneath those dusty stables, whilst they patrolled the roads and escorted pilgrims, something began to take root. An idea, a structure, the birth of something that would change the known world. The cold winter wind blows over the city of Troyes, in the French region of Champagne. It is the year 1128, and inside the cathedral, an assembly of the most powerful men in Christendom is gathered in council. Bishops wearing golden mitres, abbots of legendary monasteries, nobles from across Europe. Among them, Bernard of Clairvaux, the Cistercian monk whose word carries more weight than that of kings. His ascetic face glows with the passion of the absolute believer as he takes the floor to defend these monk knights. Bernard writes a rule for them, 72 articles that will define every aspect of their lives. How to dress, how to pray, how to eat, how to fight. The immaculate white of their cloaks, upon which they would later embroider the red cross that would make them unmistakable on every battlefield. It grants them spiritual legitimacy, elevating them above any secular army. They are not mercenaries. They are the sword of God on earth. And Pope Honorius II, present at the council, seals this recognition with his papal blessing. The news spreads across Europe like wildfire. In castles and monasteries, in market squares and taverns, people speak of these holy warriors. Second-born nobles with no inheritance to inherit find a glorious purpose in the order. Knights ruined by wars see an opportunity for redemption. Idealistic young men dream of defending the faith with sword in hand. Donations begin to arrive. A farm in Normandy, a mill in Aragon, lands in England, a castle in Portugal. Each donation is accompanied by a letter containing a plea: pray for my soul, protect my pilgrim son, save the Holy Land. In barely 2 decades, the Templars go from 9 men in dilapidated stables to an organization spanning the entire known world. They established commanderies, administrative strongholds where they managed their growing estates. Templar houses sprang up in every Christian kingdom, fortified buildings that served as farms, banks, armories, and recruitment centers all at once. The machine was set in motion, but it is on the battlefields of the East that they forge their legend. The Syrian desert trembles beneath the hooves of their horses. In 1138, they took part in the siege of Damascus. They are the spearhead of the Crusader armies, the first to charge, the last to retreat. Their discipline is legendary. Whilst other knights seek personal glory and booty, the Templars fight in close formation, obeying every order from their superiors without question. They cannot leave the battlefield unless their banner, the black and white Beauchamp, has fallen 3 times. They would rather die than surrender. Muslim chronicles speak of them with a mixture of respect and terror. Saladin, the great sultan who would unify the Islamic world, would learn to recognize their white cloaks from a distance and order their immediate execution if captured. He knows they cannot be bought or intimidated. A captured Templar has 2 options: conversion to Islam or death. They all choose death. 1187. The scorching sun beats down on the horns of Hattin, a rocky formation in Galilee that will witness one of the most utter military disasters of the Crusades. The Christian army, exhausted and dehydrated, surrounded by Saladin's forces, fights desperately. The Templars form the core of the resistance, their cavalry formations attempting to break the siege time and again. But the heat, the thirst, the overwhelming number of enemies, everything conspires against them. When the last standard falls and the battle is lost, 230 Knights Templar are captured. Saladin gathers them before his tent. He offers them one last chance to renounce their faith. Not a single one accepts. The executions begin at the following dawn. It is not professional soldiers who wield the swords, but Sufi mystics who consider it an honor to eliminate these holy warriors of the enemy. 230 men die in silence, praying until their last breath. Their blood soaks the soil of Galilee, and their martyrdom becomes legend. Jerusalem falls shortly afterwards. The true cross, Christianity's holiest relic, falls into Muslim hands. The kingdom of Jerusalem crumbles, but the Templars do not disappear. They regroup in Acre, the last great Christian stronghold in the Holy Land. From there, they continue the war. And whilst they fight, whilst they die in distant lands, their true power grows silently in Europe. In a Templar house in Paris, a merchant enters with a heavy bag of gold. He needs to travel to Jerusalem, but carrying such a fortune on the roads is an invitation to murder. The Templar commander receives him with monastic courtesy. The process is simple. The merchant deposits his gold here and receives a document encoded with symbols that only the Templars can decipher. When he arrives in the Holy Land, he will present that document at any Templar commandery and receive his money, minus a small commie, sashen, for the service. This marks the birth of the modern banking system. It is the bill of exchange, the check. Centuries before, these concepts became widespread. The Templars become the bankers to kings. They safeguard royal treasures. They manage the finances of entire crusades. They lend money to ruined nobles and to kingdoms impoverished by endless wars. Their network of commanderies functions as an international financial system. A lord in London can obtain a loan secured against land in Spain. A king in France can transfer funds to his armies in the Holy Land without moving a single chest of coins. The innovation is revolutionary. The temple in Paris becomes the financial heart of the order. It is a fortress within the city, with its own walls, defensive towers, underground vaults where more gold is stored than in most royal treasuries. The King of France deposits the crown jewels here. The popes entrust the Templars with the management of funds for crusades and charitable works. The order becomes so wealthy that it can finance the construction of cathedrals. It can purchase entire fleets of ships. It can maintain standing armies on multiple fronts. But wealth breeds envy, and power attracts suspicion. Rumors are beginning to circulate in the taverns of Europe. It is said that the Templars hold secret ceremonies behind closed doors, that their initiations include blasphemous rituals, that they worship an idol called Baphomet, that they spit on the us, that they practice sodomy as part of their vows. These are mere whispers, fantasies fueled by ignorance and resentment. But in an age where heresy is punished by burning at the stake, rumors can be as dangerous as swords. The truth is more mundane and, in a sense, more problematic. The Templars have become arrogant. They answer only to the Pope, not to kings or local bishops. Their lands are exempt from taxes. Their members cannot be tried by secular courts. They have created a state within states, a transnational organization with its own loyalties and unlimited resources. In a Europe of monarchies struggling to centralize power, the Templars represent an intolerable challenge. 1291. Acre, the last Christian stronghold in the Holy Land, crumbles under the siege of the Mamluk Sultan. For weeks, the Templars have defended the walls with suicidal desperation. They know that if Acre falls, the Christian presence in the East will come to an end. They fight house by house, street by street. Grand Master Guillaume de Beaujeu dies in battle, a Muslim arrow piercing his armor. The survivors barricade themselves inside the Templar fortress, the last bastion. They hold out for 10 more days after the rest of the city has fallen. When the fortress finally collapses, crushing defenders and attackers alike, the remaining Templars flee by sea to Cyprus. It is the end of an era. After almost 200 years, there is no Holy Land left to defend. The Order's original raison d'etre has vanished. But the Templars do not disband. In Cyprus and in their European commanderies, they continue to exist. Because now they are much more than warriors. They are bankers, diplomats, landowners. They are an institution too big to simply disappear. But without a crusade to justify their existence, without enemies to fight, they become a dangerous anachronism. And there is a man who has been watching, waiting, plotting. A man who desperately needs the Templars' gold and who will tolerate no power that does not bow down before him. Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair for his physical beauty, though not for his deeds, ascends to the throne in the year 1285. He is a man with a sharp face and cold eyes, a monarch obsessed with consolidating the absolute power of the French crown. He has fought costly wars against England and Flanders. He has devalued the currency so many times that his people call him the counterfeiting king. He has expelled the Jews from France and confiscated their property. He has taken Pope Boniface VIII hostage, indirectly causing his death when the Pope dared to challenge his authority. Now his eyes turn to the Templars. He owes a fortune to the Order. The temple in Paris houses the royal treasury, and Philip knows exactly how much gold lies in those vaults because he has seen it with his own eyes when he sought refuge there during a popular uprising. The Templars are rich beyond measure, and they are there, in his kingdom, immune to his authority, answering only to a pope whom, conveniently, Philip has just installed in Avignon, under his direct influence. Pope Clement V is a weak man, a sick man, completely dominated by the will of the French king. Philip has maneuvered for years to place a pliable pontiff on the throne of St. Peter, and Clement fulfills that role perfectly. When Philip suggests that the Templars should be investigated for heresy, Clement hesitates. The Order has served the Church faithfully for 2 centuries. But Philip insists. And Philip has information, confessions, testimonies, evidence that the holiest order in Christendom is, in reality, a nest of blasphemers and sodomites. Where does this evidence come from? From an expelled Templar named Esquieu de Floiran, a bitter man who has offered the king exactly what he needs to hear in exchange for pardon and reward. His accusations are grotesque, secret ceremonies where new members must deny Christ, spit on the cross, kiss their superiors obscenely, worship of an idol with a bearded head, unnatural sexual practices between brothers. Philip listens to these delusional fantasies and sees in them not truth, but opportunity. For months, He prepared his coup in the strictest secrecy. Sealed letters were sent to all the seneschals and sheriffs of the Kingdom of France with instructions not to open them until a specific date, 13 October 1307, a Friday. The orders are clear and brutal: to arrest all the Templars in France simultaneously, to confiscate all their assets, and to seize all their properties. It is an operation of unprecedented coordination and audacity. On the night of 12 October, Paris sleeps unsuspecting. At the temple in Paris, the knights finish their evening prayers. Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master of the Order, has recently ed with King Philip, acting as godfather at a royal christening. He suspects nothing. In commanderies throughout France, in farms and Templar fortresses, men who have dedicated their lives to faith and war sleep the sleep of the righteous. The dawn of Friday, the 13th of October, brings with it betrayal. In every city, in every village, the king's bailiffs read their sealed orders and move as one. The gates of the Templar commanderies are broken down before their occupants can react. Knights who have fought against the Saracens find themselves chained by French soldiers. There is no battle, no organized resistance. The surprise is absolute. By midday, virtually all the Templars in France are in custody. Jacques de Molay is arrested at the temple in Paris. The elderly Grand Master, who has devoted 40 years of his life to the order, is dragged down to the dungeons. Along with him, 138 knights and servants of the Paris chapter. In total, more than 600 Templars fall into the trap. And then the real horror begins. The damp, dark dungeons where they are locked up reek of mold and despair. The king's interrogators arrive with their instruments, the rack that stretches limbs until they dislocate, the burning embers that scorch the flesh, the ropes that cut off circulation, sleep deprivation, water deprivation, food deprivation. The aim is simple: to extract confessions. Confessions of heresy, of blasphemy is less than number. One hash is greater than of every imaginable crime. The Templars hold out. For days, for weeks, many refuse to confess to crimes they never committed. But the flesh is weak, and pain has limits that the will cannot always overcome. One by one, they begin to break. A knight admits to having spat upon the cross, just to make the pain stop. Another confesses to having worshipped an idol he never saw. Confessions are wrested from them with pincers and fire, but once signed, they become legal evidence. Jacques de Molay holds out longer than most. As Grand Master, as the man who leads the order, he knows his confession will be the most damaging. but even he has his limits. After weeks of torment, after seeing his brothers broken and bleeding, he signs. He admits that, upon joining the order 40 years ago, he was ordered to deny Christ and spit upon the cross. The confession is exactly what Philip needs. The king acts with brutal haste. He summons an assembly of theologians and jurists from the University of Paris. He presents the confessions to them. See, the Templars are confessed heretics. They must be tried by the church, their assets confiscated by the crown to pay the costs of the trial. Everything is perfectly legal, perfectly justified. The academicus, intimidated or bribed, nod in agreement. Pope Clement, under pressure from Avignon, issues a papal bull ordering all Christian monarchs to arrest the Templars in their territories. But outside de France, the response is lukewarm. In England, King Edward II arrests the Templars, but refuses to torture them. Without torture, there are no confessions. The English trials end in acquittals. In Aragon, the Templars barricade themselves in their castles and resist by force. The King of Aragon must besiege Templar strongholds as if they were enemies at war. In Germany, in Portugal, in Cyprus, the arrests are half-hearted and confessions non-existent. Only in France, where Philip completely controls the process, is the persecution total. 1,308. Months have passed since the arrests. In Paris, 54 Templars are taken to a camp on the outskirts of the city. They have retracted their forced confessions, declaring that everything was extracted under torture and that they are innocent of any heresy. This makes them, according to canon law, recidivist heretics. The sentence is automatic, the stake. The pyres rise against the grey spring sky. The 54 men are bound to the posts. Many are crippled by torture and can barely stand. The fire is lit. The flames consume white robes and flesh alike. Contemporary chroniclers write that none recanted their confessions, that all died proclaiming the order's innocence. The smoke of their sacrifice rises over Paris like a silent accusation. The years pass in endless legal limbo. Templars imprisoned, protracted trials, confessions and retractions, more torture, more deaths. Philip persuades the Pope to convene an ecumenical council in Vienne to decide the order's final fate. The council convenes in 1311. Bishops from across Europe debate. Many express doubts about confessions obtained under torture. Some openly defend the Templars. Philip is enraged. The French king travels to Vienne with an army. He camps at the gates of the council city. The message is clear: dissolve the order or face the consequences. Pope Clement, always weak, always fearful, gives in. On the 22nd of March, 1312, he issues the bull Vox in excelso. He does not condemn the Templars as heretics. The evidence is too flimsy even for this corrupt pope. Instead, he dissolves the order by papal decree, arguing that its reputation is too damaged to continue. It is a diplomatic surrender, but the result is the same. The Templars officially cease to exist. The order's assets, theoretically, are to pass to the Hospitallers, the other great military order. In practice, Philip has already confiscated everything in France. The commanderies, the lands, the gold, everything disappears into the royal coffers. The king has won, but there is still one loose end. Jacques de Molay and 3 senior officers of the order remain in prison, awaiting sentencing. Philip wants a final spectacle, a public validation of the entire trial. On 18 March 1314, a platform is erected in front of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. The 4 elderly Templars are brought from their dungeons. 7 years in prison have worn them down. Jacques de Molay is over 70. He is emaciated, ill. He can barely walk. Philip's plan is simple. The 4 will confess publicly one last time, thereby confirming all the charges. They will then be sentenced to life imprisonment, disappearing into dungeons where they will die forgotten. But before the gathered crowd, before the authorities of the church and the crown, Jacques de Molay does something unexpected. When it is his turn to speak, the elderly Grand Master stands tall. His voice, weakened by years of captivity, rings out clearly across the square. He retracts all confessions. He declares that the order is innocent, pure, wholly devoted to Christ. He asserts that the confessions were extracted under unbearable torture, that he lied to stop the pain, but that now, facing death, he will not die with that lie on his lips. The Templars are innocent. It is all a farce, a fabrication by the king to steal their riches. The silence that follows is absolute. Geoffroy de Charny, the tutor from Normandy, joins Molay in his retraction. The other 2, weaker or wiser, stand by their confessions and are taken back to prison. But the damage is done. Philip has been publicly defied. his case discredited by the very victims who were supposed to validate it. The king's response is immediate and furious. That very afternoon, without waiting for papal authorization or an ecclesiastical judgment, he orders that Molay and Charney be burned at the stake as relapsed heretics. It is an act of pure secular power, exercising what should be the jurisdiction of the Church. But Philip no longer cares about legalities. He cares only for their final silence. At dusk, on the Île des Juifs on the River Seine, 2 pyres are hastily prepared. The flames are lit as the sun sets over Paris. Jacques de Molay and Geoffroy de Charny burn together. Chroniclers write that Molay asked to be tied facing Notre Dame, so that he might see the cathedral as he died. They write that he shouted from the flames, cursing Philip and Clement, summoning them to appear before God's court within a year. Whether he uttered that curse or not, we shall never know for certain. What we do know is this: Clement V died a month later, on 20 April, consumed by an intestinal illness. Philip the Fair died on 29 November of the same year, following a hunting accident. He was 46 years old. The Templars' curse, real or imagined, came true. But by then, the Order of the Temple is already ashes and memory. Some Templars escaped. In Portugal, they reconstituted themselves as the Order of Christ, which would finance Portuguese voyages of exploration. In Spain, they merged with other military orders. In Scotland, according to legend, they found refuge in a kingdom that did not recognize papal authority. Some may have taken hidden treasures to secret places, sowing the seeds of countless conspiracy theories that would last for centuries. But the great order that protected the Holy Land, that invented modern banking, that defied kings and amassed incalculable wealth, that order died in the flames with Jacques de Molay. It died in the tortures of Paris and on the bonfires of the provinces. It died because it became too rich, too powerful, too independent in a world that would not tolerate such things. The story of the Knights Templar is a tale of idealism corrupted by success, of holiness tarnished by wealth, and of loyalty destroyed by political betrayal. They began as 9 poor knights in dilapidated stables, protecting pilgrims for the love of God. They ended as the most powerful financial institution in Europe, destroyed by a king who needed their gold and a pope too weak to defend them. In the ruins of their fortresses, in the forgotten archives where their documents yellow, in the legends that multiplied after their fall, the Templars remain as a reminder that no power, however holy it may seem, is safe from envy and ambition. That history is written by those who survive to tell the tale, and that sometimes the courage to die proclaiming the truth is the only victory we have left. The last bonfire dies out on the Seine. The ashes of Jacques de Molay are scattered in the nighttime water, and with them, a chapter of 200 years of glory, power, blood, and betrayal comes to a close is greater than from the Holy Sepulchre to the scaffold. The Templars travelled the full path of human rise and fall, leaving behind more questions than answers, more legends than truths, and a legacy that still echoes in the silence of cathedrals and on the pages of history. The trial that condemned an order, the conspiracy against the Templars. Chapter 2. A documented account of the judicial proceedings, torture, forced confessions, and royal betrayal. Dawn on Friday, the 13th of October, 1307 breaks over Paris with a cold, pale light. The bells of Notre Dame ring for matins, and on the cobbled streets, the first traders open their workshops, unsuspecting. But in the royal palace, in secret chambers where candles have burned all night, men clad in the king's arms prepare the greatest police operation France has ever seen. In their hands they hold letters sealed with red wax, orders they have waited weeks to carry out, orders that will change the course of history. Throughout France, in every town and village, the king's seneschals have received identical instructions. They must not open the envelopes until this specific morning. The timing must be perfect. Is greater than for, if a single Templar escapes and raises the alarm, if a single commandery fortifies itself and resists, the whole plan could collapse. Philip IV of France, the king known as the Fair for his angelic face and the Forger for his crimes, has staked everything on this moment. He has been planning for months in the utmost secrecy. Not even the Pope, theoretically the Templars' sole superior, knows what is about to happen. At the temple in Paris, the Templar stronghold that stands like a citadel within the city, Jacques de Molay finishes his morning prayers. The Grand Master of the Order is 70 years old, having dedicated his entire life to the service of Christ and the sword. His weathered face bears the scars of battles in the Holy Land, from decades of defending the faith with steel and blood. Just 2 days ago, he dined with King Philip and acted as godfather at the baptism of one of the royal children. The trust between them seemed absolute. It seemed. The gates of the temple burst inwards with the roar of battering rams. Royal guards flood the corridors. Knights who have fought against the Saracens wake to find French swords pointed at their throats. There is no time to resist, no weapons to hand. The surprise is so complete that it seems impossible. Jacques de Molay is arrested in his own room, chained like a common criminal. Around him, 138 Templar brothers of the Paris chapter suffer the same fate. Shouts of confusion and protest echo off the stones as they are dragged out. And this is not happening only in Paris. At the very same moment, in every corner of France, the scene is repeated with military precision. In Poitiers, in Lyon, in Toulouse, in the small rural commanderies where 3 or 4 Templars manage farms and mills, the doors are broken down, the men chained, the chests confiscated. By midday, more than 600 Templars are in custody. The most powerful order in Christendom has been decapitated in a single morning. But why? What crime justifies such a coordinated attack against men who, for 2 centuries, have been the defenders of the faith? The king's bailiffs read out the charges aloud as the prisoners are led to damp cells. Heresy, blasphemy, idolatry, sodomy, denial of Christ. The accusations are so grotesque that many Templars laugh, convinced that this must be a monstrous mistake that will soon be cleared up. They do not yet realize that they are in the hands of something far darker than justice. Guillaume de Nogaret waits in the dungeons. He is the king's chancellor, the legal mastermind behind this operation. A slender man with a sharp face and eyes that never blink. It was he who orchestrated the kidnapping of Pope Boniface VIII years ago, slapping him with his iron gauntlet in an agni, causing the pontiff's death from humiliation. Now he has an even more ambitious mission: to legally destroy the Templars, confiscate their immense wealth, and do it all in such a way that it appears to be divine justice rather than royal theft. The first interrogations begin that very night. The Templars are led one by one into stone chambers where torches cast dancing shadows on the walls. The interrogators, men trained by the Inquisition, ask the questions in a monotonous voice. Is it true that upon joining the order, you were ordered to deny Christ? Did you spit on the cross? Did you worship a bearded idol called Baphomet? Did you kiss your superiors obscenely? The questions are so specific that it is clear someone has prepared them in advance. Someone knows exactly which confessions they need to obtain. The Templars deny everything. With indignation, with fury, with tears. They are warrior monks. They have dedicated their lives to Christ. The accusations are delusional fantasies. But the interrogators remain unmoved. They take note of every denial and make a mark. Then other men enter, carrying instruments that glimmer faintly in the torchlight. The rack is a wooden table with pulleys and ropes. The prisoner's wrists and ankles are tied tightly. The torturers begin to turn the cranks. The ropes tighten. The body is stretched. The tendons begin to tear from the bones. The pain is indescribable. It goes beyond what the mind can process. The shoulders dislocate with an audible crack. The knees pop out of their joints. And whilst the Templar screams, the questions continue. Did you deny Christ? Did you spit upon the cross? Some hold out for days. Some for weeks. But the human body has limits that the will cannot overcome. A knight named Jean de Foligny endures 7 sessions of torture before breaking. When he finally confesses, his words come out amidst sobs. Yes, he denied Christ. Yes, he spat upon the cross. Whatever you want to hear, just stop the pain. His confession is put in writing. He signs or makes a mark. Because his hands are so mangled he can barely hold the pen. The document is carefully filed away. It is legal evidence. Techniques vary depending on the executioner. Some use water, forcing wet cloth down the prisoner's throat until he chokes, until he feels his lungs will burst. Others prefer fire, applying burning embers to the soles of bare feet. There is a particularly cruel method where fat is smeared on the prisoner's feet and they are placed near flames, cooking them slowly. A Templar named Bernard de Vado endures this for so long that his feet literally detach from his legs, the charred bones separating from the burnt tissue. He confesses everything they demand. He dies 3 days later from his injuries. But it is not just physical pain. Sleep deprivation is an equally effective weapon. They keep prisoners awake for days, weeks. Every time they close their eyes, they are beaten awake. The mind begins to disintegrate. Hallucinations, delusions, reality becomes fluid. A man in that state will confess to anything simply for the privilege of sleep. And those confessions are also valid in law. Jacques de Molay resists longer than most. As Grand Master, he knows that his confession will be the most damaging to the order. The interrogators focus on him with particular intensity. They use not only physical torture, but psychological. They show him confessions from other Templars, from men he knows and trusts. They tell him that the order is already doomed, that his resistance is futile, that he is merely prolonging his own suffering for no purpose. The why promise him clemency if he cooperates. They threaten him with even worse torture if he does not. After weeks in a cell without light, with no way of knowing whether it was day or night, after sessions of torture whose duration he could no longer gauge, Jacques de Molay broke down. On 25 October, barely 12 days after his arrest, he signed a confession. He admits that, when he joined the order 40 years ago, the master who received him ordered him to deny Christ and spit on the cross. He says he obeyed, though his heart resisted. It is exactly what Guillaume de Nogaret needs. The Grand Master's confession legitimizes all the others. But Philip knows that confessions wrested from secret dungeons are not enough. He needs public validation. He needs public opinion to turn against the Templars. On 22 October, barely 9 days after the arrests, the king convenes an extraordinary assembly in the royal garden. Nobles, prelates, burghers, representatives of the University of Paris, all are summoned to hear the revelations about the Templars' crimes. Guillaume de Nogaret takes the floor. His voice echoes through the garden as he describes in nauseating detail the alleged practices of the Templars. Secret initiation ceremonies where new members must deny Christ 3 times. Spitting, urinating, and even defecating on sacred crucifixes. Kissing their superiors on the anus, on the navel, on the mouth. Nighttime worship of a demonic idol with a goat's head. Sodomitic practices between brothers, not only permitted but ordered by superiors. Murders of babies for diabolical rituals. Each accusation is more grotesque than the last. The audience listens in horror. Many know the Templars personally and know them to be pious men. But Nogaret has evidence. He reads out signed confessions. He calls witnesses, men who swear they have seen these abominations. Most of these witnesses are former Templars expelled from the order for crimes or misconduct, men harboring deep resentment. One of them, Escu de Floiran, is the one who originally brought these accusations to the king. He is a known perjurer, a thief, a man without honor. But his testimony, combined with the confessions obtained under torture, creates a convincing narrative. Philip himself speaks, his handsome face transfigured by pious indignation. He declares that he acted out of sacred duty, that upon discovering these heresies, he had no choice but to protect the faith of France. He presents himself as a defender of Christendom, not as the thief he truly is. And it works. He's greater than the crowd, manipulated by propaganda and false confessions, begins to shout against the Templars. The very people who 2 weeks ago venerated them now demand their blood. But there is a problem. The Templars do not fall under the king's jurisdiction. They are a religious order answerable directly to the Pope. Philip needs the church to validate his see, Oop. And this is where his most important pawn comes into play, Clement V, the Pope whom he himself placed on the throne of St. Peter. Bertrand de Got, now Pope Clement V, receives the news of the arrests with horror. Not because he particularly cares about the Templars, but because Philip has acted without consulting him, usurping papal authority. He is furious, humiliated. He sends angry letters to Paris, demanding explanations. But Philip knows his puppet well. Clement is a weak man, perpetually ill, dependent on French support to maintain his papacy. He is trapped in Avignon, in territory controlled by the king. And Philip has evidence. He has confessions, including that of the Grand Master. When Philip sends copies of the confessions to Avignon, Clement hesitates. If the charges are true, he must act. But the confessions were obtained under torture, and he knows it. Is greater than any medieval jurist knows that testimony extracted through pain is unreliable. Canon law itself recognizes this. But how can he ignore the confession of the Grand Master himself? How can he defend an order accused of heresy by hundreds of its own members? The Pope attempts a desperate compromise. He sends 2 cardinals to Paris to personally interrogate the Templar leaders. If they confess voluntarily, without torture, before papal representatives, then perhaps the charges have substance. The cardinals arrive in November. They are received with every courtesy by Guillaume de Nogaret. Jacques de Molay and other leaders are brought from their cells, cleaned, dressed decently. The interviews take place in private. Before the cardinals, Molay repeats his confession. He says that the order is guilty, that he personally committed heresy upon joining. The cardinals are disturbed. One of them, Berengar Fredel, is an experienced jurist. He observes Molay's trembling hands, the way he avoids eye contact, the sweat on his brow despite the winter chill. He asks more probing questions. Why would the order have maintained heretical practices for 2 centuries? How could generations of Templars, including holy men and martyrs, have taken part in such abominations? Molay responds evasively, with contradictions. Fredel understands this man is terrified. He has been broken by torture and now says what his captors want to hear. But the confession has already been made, signed, sealed. The damage is irreversible. The cardinals return to Avignon with an ambiguous report that satisfies no one. Meanwhile, throughout France, confessions continue to pile up. Of the more than 600 Templars arrested, Almost all eventually confess to something. Torture methods are refined and become more efficient. The interrogators learn exactly how much pain to inflict, when to offer relief, how to break the will without killing the prisoner. Because a dead Templar cannot testify, they need living witnesses to validate T. Phillips' narrative. There are exceptions. Some knights resist to the death. Jean de Chateauvillars is tortured for months, his bones broken one by one, but he never confesses. He dies in his cell, his body shattered but his will intact. His name would have been lost to history were it not for an anonymous chronicler who recorded it in a forgotten manuscript. How many more died without confessing, leaving no trace? We shall never know. In February 1308, Philip decides he needs a more dramatic public spectacle. 54 Templars who have confessed under torture are brought before an ecclesiastical commission in Paris. The idea is simple. They will confess publicly, confirming all the charges before respectable witnesses. Then they will be pardoned and sentenced to life imprisonment. It is the final act of Philip's judicial theater. But something unexpected happens. When the first Templar, a knight named Ponsard de Gizy, is called upon to confirm his confession, he refuses. Standing before the bishops, emaciated by months of torture, he declares that he lied under unbearable torment. The order is innocent. It is all a fabrication. He would rather die telling the truth than live perpetuating the lie. One after another, the Templars recant. Of the 54, all but 4 reject their previous confessions. It is a disaster for Philip. If these men are allowed to testify about the torture, if they publicly admit that the confessions were false, the whole case falls apart. The king's response is immediate and brutal. According to canon law, a heretic who confesses and then recants is a relapsed heretic. And the punishment for relapsed heresy is unequivocal. The stake is greater than that very afternoon. Without waiting for the formal sentence from the ecclesiastical commission, Philip orders the execution. In a field on the outskirts of Paris, 54 pyres are hastily erected. The wood is still green. The fire will burn slowly and painfully. The Templars are tied to the posts. Many can barely stand, crippled by torture. The torches touch the wood. The fire creeps slowly. The smoke suffocates them before the flames burn. The chroniclers witnessing the scene write that none of the 54 renounce their recantation. As the flames consume them, they cry out their innocence. They proclaim that the order is pure. They curse their accusers. Their voices fade one by one in the crackling of the fire. The smoke from that day hangs over Paris for hours, a black cloud staining the sky. The onlookers begin to murmur. Some recall that these men were once heroes, defenders of the faith. Doubts begin to seep into Philip's narrative. But by then, terror has done its work. No Templar will publicly recant again for years. Pope Clement, informed of the massacre, is furious. Philip has executed prisoners who were under ecclesiastical jurisdiction without awaiting a papal sentence. It is a flagrant usurpation of authority. But what can Clement do? He is trapped in Avignon, surrounded by French troops, dependent on French gold. He protests in writing, but takes no real action. His weakness is laid bare for the whole Christian world to see. Meanwhile, Philip presses other kingdoms to arrest their Templars. He sends copies of the confessions to England, Aragon, Germany, Italy. He orders the Pope to issue a bull commanding universal arrests. Clement, cornered, obeys. On 22 November 1307, he issues the papal bull Pastoralis Praemunentiae, ordering all Christian monarchs to arrest the Templars and confiscate their assets. But outside France, the response is very different. In England, King Edward II arrests the Templars in obedience to the Pope, but refuses to torture them. English jurists argue that torture is illegal under common law. Without torture, there are no confessions, is greater than the English interrogations turned into farces in which the Templars denied all charges and there was no way to make them change their minds. Eventually, most were acquitted or sentenced to minor penances. In Aragon, the Templars are warned of the arrests in advance. They barricade themselves in their fortresses. King James II has to besiege Templar castles as if they were enemies at war. In Miravet, the most powerful Templar fortress in Aragon, the knights hold out for a year. When they finally surrender due to starvation in 1309, they do so on certain conditions. They will not be tortured. They will receive a fair trial. The king agrees. The Aragonese trials, conducted without torture, result in almost universal acquittals. In Cyprus, where the Templars have their headquarters following the loss of the Holy Land, the Marshal of the Order, Aimé Docelier, leads an open rebellion. The Templars take control of the island for months. Only the arrival of a papal fleet forces them to surrender. But even then, the Cypriot trials are lenient. Most of the Templars are acquitted and allowed to retire to monasteries. In Portugal, King Dionysius openly protects the Templars. The arrests are symbolic. Eventually, he simply renames the Order of Christ, and allows them to continue to exist under another name. The Portuguese navigators who will discover the world will bear on their sails the Templar cross, now called the Cross of Christ. Only in France, where Philip completely controls the judicial process, is the persecution total. And only in France do confessions flow like rivers. The conclusion is obvious to any honest observer. Without torture, there is no evidence. The entire case against the Templars rests on testimonies wrung out in agony in French dungeons. But Philip needs more than just confessions. He needs final ecclesiastical validation. He presses the Pope to convene an ecumenical council to pass definitive judgment on the order. Clement tries to resist, but the king is relentless. In 1311, the council is convened in Vienne, a city in the Dauphiné, formerly part of the Holy Roman Empire but effectively under French influence. Bishops from across Europe converge on Vienne in October of that year. There are 114 prelates who will debate not only the fate of the Templars, but also a new crusade to the Holy Land and ecclesiastical reforms. The debates on the Templars are heated. Many bishops, especially those who are not French, express deep doubts about confessions obtained under torture. The Archbishop of Ravenna argues passionately that the order must be allowed to defend itself formally, to present witnesses, to refute the accusations. The Pope, showing a glimmer of dignity, seems inclined to allow the Templars to defend themselves. He announces that he will send representatives to seek out Templars willing to testify in favor of the order. The news spreads. Templars imprisoned throughout France, desperate for a final chance at justice, send messages to Vienne. They want to testify. They want to tell the truth about the torture. In February 1312, hundreds of Templars from all over France arrive in Vienne or send representatives. A group of 9 knights is selected to speak before the council. Their leader is Pierre de Boulogne, an eloquent Templar who has prepared a detailed defense of the order. He will argue that the confessions are false, extracted under torture. He will present evidence of the order's historical sanctity, of its martyrs, of its services to Christendom. It is their last hope. Philip the Fair hears this news and is enraged. He cannot allow the Templars to present any defense. Any serious investigation into the torture will destroy his case. He acts with his characteristic brutality. In March 1312, he arrives in Vienne with an army. He camps at the city gates with sufficient troops to storm it if necessary. The message to the Pope and the Council is crystal clear: dissolve the order or there will be consequences. Clement, always weak, crumbles under the pressure. He refuses to allow the Templars to testify. He cancels the defense hearings. And on 3 April, in a secret session attended by only a few cardinals, he makes his decision. On 22 March 1312, during a public session of the council, Clement V read the papal bull Times Vox in Excelso. He did not condemn the Templars as heretics. He tacitly admitted that the evidence was insufficient for that. Instead, he dissolved the order by administrative decree. He argued that the Templars' reputation was so tarnished, whether or not they were actually guilty, that the order could no longer fulfill its function. It was cowardice dressed up as pragmatism. It was surrender disguised as administration. The order's assets, declares the Pope, will pass to the Hospitallers, the other great military order. In practice, this is a farce. In France, Philip has already confiscated everything. The Templar commanderies, the lands, the mills, the castles, the legendary treasure of the Temple of Paris. Everything has vanished into the royal coffers. The Hospitallers will inherit only debts and ruins. But there are still loose ends. Jacques de Molay and 3 other Templar leaders remain in prison, awaiting their final sentence. Philip wants a final act to seal the narrative. A public validation in which the confessed leaders of the order admit their guilt before all of Paris, thereby retroactively justifying the entire process. On 18 March 1314, 7 years after the initial arrests, a wooden platform is erected in front of Notre Dame. It is a grey day in early spring, with low clouds threatening rain. A vast crowd gathers in the square. Nobles in their boxes, prelates in ceremonial robes, bourgeois and artisans, beggars and prostitutes, all come to witness the end of the Templars. Jacques de Molay is brought from his cell. He is over 70 years old. 7 years in prison have worn him down. His beard is as white as snow, his body bent, his skin sallow. Beside him, Geoffroy de Charny, preceptor of Normandy, Hugues de Perrot, visitor of France, and Geoffroy de Gonneville, preceptor of Aquitaine. The 4 elderly men are the last visible remnants of what was once the most powerful order in Christendom. The plan is simple. A cardinal will read out the 4 men's prior confessions. They will confirm them publicly. They will then be sentenced to life imprisonment. disappearing into dungeons where they will die, forgotten by history. Philip will be in the royal box, watching his final victory. Guillaume de Nogaret, the architect of the trial, is present to savor the triumph. The cardinal begins to read. Jacques de Molay's confession, he admitted to denying Christ and spitting on the cross. Charney's, similar. Perrault and Gonneville, the same. The documents are clear. The signatures authentic. All that remains is for the accused to confirm with their own voices. Geoffroy de Gonneville speaks first when asked. His voice is weak, broken. He confirms his confession. He accepts the sentence. He is led from the platform, destined to die in a dark cell. Hugues de Perrault does the same. 2 out of 4. Philip smiles. Then it is Jacques de Molay's turn. The elderly Grand Master steps forward, his chains clinking. The silence in the square is absolute. Thousands of people hold their breath. Molay opens his mouth, and instead of confirming, instead of surrendering, he does something no one expected. His voice, weakened by years of imprisonment, rises clear and strong across the square. He retracts all confessions. He declares that the order of the temple is innocent, pure, wholly devoted to Christ. He says he confessed under unbearable torture, that he lied to stop the pain, but that now, facing death, he will not die with that lie on his lips. The temple is holy. The charges are false. It is all a conspiracy by the king to steal the order's riches. The effect is electric. The crowd bursts into murmurs. The nobles look at one another, scandalized. The prelates shift uneasily in their seats. Philip stands up in his box, his face contorted with fury. Guillaume de Nogaret is pale as a ghost. Geoffroy de Charny joins Molay in his retraction. He too declares his innocence, the innocence of the order. He too admits to having lied under torture. The 2 elders, standing on that platform in front of Notre Dame, destroy 7 years of royal propaganda with their words. The cardinal does not know what to do. Protocol does not provide for this. They were supposed to confirm, not to recant. He desperately seeks instructions from the royal box. But Philip has already left, furious, back to the palace. And in the palace, surrounded by his advisors, he makes a decision that sealed his place in the hell of history. According to canon law, only the Church may judge cases of heresy. A relapsed heretic must be handed over to the secular authorities for execution, but only after a formal ecclesiastical sentence has been passed. Philip does not wait. That very afternoon, without papal authorization and without a sentence from any court, he orders that Molay and Charney be burned at the stake as relapsed heretics. It is an act of pure secular power, a final usurpation of all ecclesiastical authority. But Philip no longer cares about legalities. He cares about silence. The pyres are hastily erected on the Ile des Juifs, a small islet in the Seine traditionally used for executions. Carpenters work feverishly as the sun begins to set. 2 wooden posts, firewood piled around them. Simple, brutal, effective. Jacques de Molay and Geoffroy de Charny are led to the islet as the golden light of dusk bathes the river. A crowd has gathered on the banks, thousands of Parisians who have followed the day's drama. Molay asks for one final favor, to be tied facing Notre Dame, so that he may see the cathedral as he dies. The executioners, surprisingly, agree. The 2 elderly men are tied to their posts. The fire is lit. The flames begin to climb slowly. The smoke rises. And from the fire, the voice of Jacques de Molay rises one last time. The chroniclers who witness the scene will write different accounts of his last words. Some say he simply prayed. Others that he proclaimed his innocence to the very end. But the versi on that survives in popular memory is more dramatic. They say that Molay cursed his persecutors, that he summoned Philip and Clement to appear before the court of God within a year. They say his voice echoed over the waters of the Seine as the flames consumed him. Pope Clement, King Philip, I summon you before God within the year. Whether or not he uttered those exact words, we shall never know for certain. What we do know, what is documented in chronicles from multiple sources, is this: Pope Clement V died on 20 April 1314, just 33 days after the execution. An intestinal illness, probably cancer, consumed him in agony. Philip the Fair died on 29 November of the same year, at the age of 46. A hunting accident, they say. A wild boar charged him. An infection set in. A fever consumed him. The Templars' curse, whether real or mere coincidence, is fulfilled, and the whole of Europe takes note. Whispers about the injustice of the trial turn to cries. Chroniclers who once remained silent now write of their doubts. poets compose ballads about the martyred Templars. Philip's narrative begins to crumble in the historical memory. But by then, the damage is done. The Order of the Temple has been destroyed. 600 men tortured. Dozens executed at the stake. Hundreds more died in prison from their wounds. Thousands were stripped of their identity, forced to live as mendicant monks. A heritage of 2 centuries of donations, of lands stretching from England to the Holy Land, confiscated and plundered, and all based on confessions wrested by fire and iron in dark dungeons. All based on the testimony of perjurers and broken men. All orchestrated by a king in need of gold and a pope too weak to defend justice. The trial that condemned the Templars was not a triumph of the law. It was the perfect demonstration of how the law can be perverted, how justice can be bought, how naked power can cloak itself in the mantle of legality. The documents survive in dusty archives. Blood-stained confessions. Transcripts of interrogations where pain bleeds through the Latin words. Royal orders sealed with red wax. Papal bulls attempting to justify the unjustifiable. And in those documents, anyone who can read between the lines can see the truth. This was not justice. It was conspiracy, theft, and judicial murder on a massive scale. Guillaume de Nogaret, the legal architect of the trial, died just 1 year after Philip, in 1314. The 3 men who destroyed the Templars died within the space of 8 months. Philip's dynasty crumbled. His 3 sons will reign in rapid succession and die without male heirs, extinguishing the direct line of the Capetians. The curse, they say, consumed the entire royal line. But the victims do not rise again. The burnt Templars remain ashes. Those who survived the tortures bear the marks on their broken bodies to their graves. The truth of their innocence or guilt was lost in the fire of forced confessions, in the smoke of the pyres, in the darkness of the dungeons where good men were broken by evil men. What remains is a lesson in the power of torture to create whatever truth the torturer desires. A lesson in how ambition can masquerade as piety. A lesson in the fragility of justice when faced with the alliance of political power and ecclesiastical cowardice. On the Ile des Juifs, the fire finally dies down. The ashes of Jacques de Molay cool in the night breeze over the Seine. The Parisians return to their homes in silence. And in that silence, in that darkness falling upon the river, ends not only the lives of 2 men, but the innocence of an entire era. The era when it was believed that justice could triumph over power. The era when it was believed that truth could not be burned. That innocence died with the Templars in the flames, and the trial that condemned them remains as an eternal monument to the human capacity for legalized evil, for systematic cruelty, for the destruction of the righteous by the convenient.
Release the tension in your forehead. Relax the muscles around your eyes. Let your arms rest completely, heavy and warm at either side of your body. Your breath now flows naturally, like gentle waves lapping at the shore and receding effortlessly. The stories you have heard tonight slowly fade away, becoming distant whispers that you no longer need to follow. If this journey through time has served you well, you can support this space by liking, subscribing, or sharing your thoughts in the comments. That way, more people seeking rest may find refuge here. And if you are still awake, there is another story waiting in silence, ready to guide you deeper into sleep. But for now, let the voices of the past fade gently away. Let the names, dates, and events melt into the mist of the night's oblivion. The story can wait until tomorrow. Close your eyes. Let go of everything. Rest deeply, and may you have sweet dreams.